Tonight on Bridge City News, a major spring snowstorm left many without power and in the ditches both in Alberta and Saskatchewan. Residents in Ontario and Quebec are still dealing with major flooding, forcing some to evacuate. And can incoming Premier Jason Kenney really turn off the taps to BC? We hear from Toronto lawyer Ari Goldkind, who gives us his thoughts.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. It was a snowstorm for the ages. The blizzard that hit both Alberta and Saskatchewan over the weekend left many areas without power, including here in Lethbridge, and left many people as well in the ditch. This was the scene on Saturday night as a strong low-pressure system brought heavy snow and strong winds to both southern and central Alberta. The Trans-Canada Highway east of Calgary was closed in both directions on Saturday. Calgary received up to 20 centimeters of snow, while west of the city received up to 30 centimeters of the white stuff. A bus traveling on Highway 1 with 15 people on board hit the ditch east of Highway 22. Several people were taken to hospital with injuries. West of Colehurst, the O'Donnell family was right in the middle of calving season when the blizzard hit. Here are some pictures of one of the newborns that was separated from its mother. The family had a challenge recovering the calves, which were buried in the snow. Fortunately, the cows and calves did survive, but it was dicey for a while.
Saturday night around 11 o'clock, we did our last check for the night, and husband woke up again at 3 a.m. and noticed it was blizzarding and blowing and cold, so we went outside and bundled up and did our night check and found that there was calves missing from their mamas and on the wrong side of fences and all covered in snow. So we took the truck out in the tractor and pretty much just drove around the pasture in the snow and the cold and picked up whatever calves we noticed that needed some help and found them, brought them in the shop, warmed them up and put some windbreaks out for the cows, and yeah, just kind of drove around and tried to make sure everybody was okay and no calves were lost from their mamas.
Video journalist Ainsley O'Reilly was actually caught up in some of that action. You were driving from Alberta to Saskatchewan and you ended up in the ditch?
Yes, it takes about 6 hours to get from here, Lethbridge, all the way to Regina, which is where I was traveling. On the way back, it took me 13 hours.
Wow.
That Highway 1 was closed. As you're driving, nothing but transport trucks, people in the ditch. Right after it was closed, I ended up going through the ditch, all the way up, almost through oncoming traffic, and I was completely stuck. When I called for a tow, they said, "You won't be getting one today."
Wow, thank God you survived that. And you actually had some guys come to your rescue? Some good Samaritans?
Yeah, these lovely prairie people. They were so nice. They came down, they went back, they got shovels, they pushed me out of the ditch, and I was on my way back. It took an additional 6 hours from there.
And you made it back into the newsroom. Welcome back.
Thank Lord, thank you all for your prayers.
You bet. As Alberta and Saskatchewan were being walloped with a nasty spring snowstorm, residents in Ontario and Quebec have had to deal with severe flooding. A broken Quebec dike northwest of Montreal forced the evacuation of thousands of residents.
Police pass, you say, you got 2 minutes to leave and get out. And we look on the street and you see like a river, the water's coming, And we just have time to take my paper, and leave. My house is finished. Just front of my house, they got the water. They have maybe 2 feet high the water inside.
The City of Ottawa says residents there should prepare for the effects of spring flooding for many more weeks. The city was working to ensure one of its main water filtration plants was not overwhelmed by floodwaters.
We continue to project peak levels in the future days of over 50 centimeters above the 2017 peak levels that we had observed then. Sandbagging operations are going very well. We have 577,000 sandbags currently available.
Paramedics, fire services, police, and Ottawa Public Health have completed more than 216 wellness visits today. We have had 18 self-evacuations, and that we are progressing with the wellness visits. We have had a tremendous show of support from the community, and that's another great thing about Ottawa. More than 4,000 residents have volunteered to help, including about 1,800 people today alone.
We have public health nurses and public health inspectors going door to door to meet with residents in their homes, assessing their health and their ability to cope and answer questions about drinking water, food safety, mental health, well water, health hazards, and assisting with evacuation efforts if needed.
More than 2,500 members of Northern Ontario's Kashechewan First Nation have been flown out of their flooded community for another year. Indigenous leaders want the province to push Ottawa to make good on its promises to relocate the community. Given the response to floods in other parts of the country, the Deputy Grand Chief believes his group would have seen action sooner if it was not a First Nation community. Lethbridge Police have charged a 57-year-old man in connection with multiple break-and-enters, including the Lethbridge Courthouse. The investigation revealed that various establishments were broken into, including the Cooperators, Vars Steel, Synergy Digital Dental Arts, and the Catholic Central High School. Most of the goods stolen were cash, credit, and debit cards. Rodney Bruce, Prince of no fixed address, is charged with 4 counts of shop breaking and various counts of theft. He was known to RCMP in Prince George, BC, and has a history of property offenses. Prince appeared at the Lethbridge Courthouse earlier today. This Sunday, expect to see cadets and veterans in uniform in front of the cenotaph. A service to commemorate the Battle of the Atlantic will happen this Sunday at 11 a.m. The battle was the longest continuous military campaign in the Second World War, running from 1939 to 1945, with losses of nearly 100,000 lives and more than 4,500 ships. Commanding officer for the Royal Canadian Sea Cadet Corps, Chinook, tells us what we can expect to see.
We'll have 2 cadet units and hopefully some veterans and a few dignitaries from the city. We will march out from in behind City Hall and come here to the cenotaph, and we'll commemorate the ships that were sunk and the number of soldiers that were lost or lives lost during that campaign from 1939 to 1945.
A special ceremony was held in Lethbridge yesterday, remembering those who lost their lives while on the job. The National Day of Mourning took place at the Mountain View Cemetery. Representatives from the Alberta Union of Provincial Employees were there, as were many local politicians. Last year, 162 people were killed in Alberta due to workplace illnesses or injuries. Steps for Life Walk takes place this weekend and will help support families affected by life-changing workplace injuries, illnesses, and deaths.
What Steps for Life is it's the fundraising arm of a national charity called Threads of Life. And what Steps for Life does is has walks in about 30 communities across Canada. And at these walks, people register in teams from different companies, or it could be a family of someone who's had a loved one hurt or seriously injured at work. And then they collect pledges. They pay money to register to walk. They collect pledges to walk. And then all that money comes to us, and we send that to the Threads of Life charity, which is headquartered in Ontario. And they use that money to hold what they call family forums. And those family forums are held in the Maritime provinces, in Ontario, Quebec, and in the Western provinces out here. And what that money goes for is to help those people who are struggling to reach a new normal after they've had a loved one either seriously injured or hurt.
It's the 11th anniversary for the Steps of Life Walk, and it takes place Saturday, May 4th at 10 a.m. at Henderson Lake Park at the Horseshoe Pit. For more information, visit threadsoflife.ca. Avita Canada has partnered with Water Aid to bring clean water to underdeveloped countries. The salon in Lethbridge took part in a walk this morning to raise awareness for the cause. A few of its employees have had the opportunity to visit Madagascar and see firsthand the impact donations have made on struggling communities.
Being there and seeing it and seeing the work that's being done there and the lives that are changed, I was changed. I mean, we get up in the morning, we turn on the tap, we let it run until it gets cold. We get in the shower, we wait for it to get hot. All that wasted water, I don't think that we even think of it because it's just so natural for us to do that. But the truth is, there's so many people that don't have that opportunity. They don't have clean water. Water saves lives.
We got to see villages, we got to see cities, we got to eat the food, we got to see lemurs, and we got to see people whose lives were radically changed by clean water.
Since 2006, the campaign has raised $230 million for clean water initiatives that has helped to serve 9.5 million people. The opioid crisis continues in Lethbridge and across the province. Now, there's a group which helps addicts at the Fort Macleod Detox Centre find a better life. Pastor Bill Swartbull is the executive director of Love Lethbridge, and he says when it comes to breaking someone's addiction, it's all about trust.
For instance, one of the topics I bring is honesty, getting honest with yourself, and I go into the area of trust. Who do you trust? And trust is a very big issue, and so how do you build trust? It takes time. So if they can actually trust somebody, Now they're willing to open up and share a little bit, and some of the pains come out, the hurts come out, and you can begin to walk with them. But most of them, though they lean on each other, being in that world, yet they trust nobody but themselves.
Watch the full interview with Pastors Wartbull talking recovery and how we can help those battling addictions in our community. That interview is coming up in the second half of our newscast. The transition team for incoming Premier Jason Kenney confirms that a member of our province's energy regulator has quit. Ed Whittingham has resigned from the board of directors of the Alberta Energy Regulator. He was accused by Kenney of supporting groups seeking to landlock Alberta's oil and gas industry. It is an accusation Whittingham has denied. He cannot be immediately reached for comment on his resignation. Premier-designate Jason Kenney says Alberta will turn off the taps to BC if BC does not work with us to help get the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion built. But legally, can Kenney do that? Toronto lawyer Ari Goldkind has been studying this case and gives us his thoughts.
In Bill 12, there's abilities to regulate the licenses of the energy exports or exporters, where they export, how they do it, how much they do it on a daily basis. But Kenney, because he's been so open about what he's doing, is clearly sending a flag to a court that this is really a discriminatory use of the reserves that he has in Alberta, and a court might say you can't do that. But the how is really interesting by him sort of monkeying with these licenses, and if the exporters and energy producers don't comply, he then can take away their licenses.
Catch the full interview with Mr. Goldkind talking oil, gas, and carbon tax coming up after business news. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau mistakenly referred to strong ties between Canada and China during Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's whirlwind visit to Ottawa this weekend. Trudeau kicked off the Sunday morning photo op on Parliament Hill, noting 90 years of diplomatic relations between Canada and China before he corrected himself.
Real pleasure it is to welcome Prime Minister Shinzo Abe to Ottawa for the second time, to Canada for the second time in a year, to Ottawa for the first time of this mandate, on the occasion of 90 years of diplomatic relations between Canada and China, Canada and Japan, a very auspicious moment where we move forward in deepening trade ties, in strong connections between people to people, and a very, very positive look as Japan hosts the G20.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau also talked about the importance of the rebooted Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. It is the 11-country trade alliance which was rescued after U.S. President Donald Trump withdrew the U.S. from it in 2017, nearly killing it.
The TPP was a deal that was originally designed to have the United States as part of it. And when the American administration decided to pull out of the TPP, because of Prime Minister Abe's leadership, we were able to move forward on a deal that is both comprehensive and progressive, that has benefited tremendously in Canadian citizens, Japanese citizens and businesses, and indeed people throughout the region. We know, for example, that continuing to move forward on freer, more open trade, according to the rules that we can all agree on, is something we need more in the world, and it is certainly our shared hope that the CPTPP will increasingly be a model for trade agreements, not just throughout the Pacific, but eventually around the world.
This Thursday is Holocaust Remembrance Day. A recent 2018 audit says Canada recorded more than 2,000 incidents of anti-Semitic harassment, vandalism, and violence last year. It was the most we've seen in 40 years of reporting.
2018 is the third straight record-breaking year for recorded anti-Semitic incidents in Canada. 2018 saw a 16.5% increase in anti-Semitic harassment, vandalism, and violence, with 2,041 recorded incidents, compared to 2017's 1,752 incidents. Our primary concern with the trend we are observing is that this may be indicating a new normal in terms of the propagation of anti-Semitism in Canada, along the same pattern of growth in anti-Semitism that has been observed in Europe and elsewhere in the world. Online anti-Semitism, ranging from malicious sentiments to threats of violence and calls for genocide, proliferate wildly on social media platforms and has increasingly been reported to B'nai B'rith in the forms of hostile text messages, emails, and other internet-based forums.
A U.S. college student was arrested following a synagogue shooting in San Diego, California on Saturday. One person died and 3 others were injured in the attack. Oscar Stewart says he pursued the gunman who killed one person and wounded 3 others in that synagogue in California. He said he was taking part in services on Saturday when the gunfire erupted.
I heard gunshots. I saw everybody running, so I ran to the lobby where the guy was with the gun. And I saw him discharge 2 more rounds. As he was discharging the rounds, I ran up to him and I yelled at him, and he dropped his weapon and he ran out, and I chased him out of the sanctuary. I didn't see anybody else. All I remember is everybody was running. I heard the gunshots. Everybody ran out. I jumped up and I ran to the lobby. I was in the military, and I think that's what I ran to fire. That's what I did. I didn't plan it. I didn't think about it. It's just what I did. So they say I'm a hero. I don't think I'm a hero. I just did what I did.
Just as Canada's been dealing with a measles outbreak in Ontario, comes word that there is a bigger outbreak south of the border. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention said there have been more measles cases reported this year in the United States than in the past 25 years.
So far, since January this year, we're reporting 704 cases of measles from 22 states. That's more cases of measles in a single year that we've seen in the past 25 years. It is early in the year, so I do expect to see additional measles cases. Most Americans are vaccinated, and we know that the vaccine can protect against measles and stop these outbreaks before it spreads farther. These outbreaks are really being fueled by misinformation and myth that is leading communities to be under-vaccinated. Also, there's a large increase in measles globally. The World Health Organization recently reported a 300% increase in measles around the world.
Nice to see a lot of the snow from the weekend spring blizzard melt away, and fortunately, warmer temperatures are on the way. Complete weather details are coming up. A lot of the snow from the spring blizzard melted today. Tonight, a chance of more snow developing mixed with rain and a low near -8. Tomorrow, mainly sunny and a high near 7. Wednesday, even warmer with the mercury climbing to 13. Thursday, a low pressure system returns, bringing clouds, showers, and a high of 11. Friday, just a few clouds developing with a high near 11 degrees again. Saturday, cooling off slightly with a chance of rain and a high of 8. Sunday, a mixture of sun and cloud and a high near 13. Looking at the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 16 and an average low of 2. The highest temperature on this date was recorded in 1939 at 29 degrees, and the record low was -12 in 2005. Sunrise was at 6:13, a sunset at 8:45. Let's have a look at the national temperatures for tomorrow now. Victoria will be mainly sunny and a high of 18, only slightly cooler and 15 in Vancouver. Calgary will have rain mixed with snow and a high near 6. Periods of snow at 2 degrees in Edmonton tomorrow. Mainly sunny and 7 for Regina. Good chance of rain at 10 degrees for Saskatoon. Mainly overcast at 8 for Winnipeg on Tuesday. Cloudy and 10 for Toronto. Ottawa, which has been dealing with lots of flooding, will have even more rain, no reprieve, and a high of 10 tomorrow. Montreal will also receive showers at 9. In the Maritimes, Fredericton, New Brunswick will have light showers at 8. Halifax, Nova Scotia will also receive rain at 7. Charlottetown, PEI will have clouds at 7. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, expect flurries and a high near 2 degrees tomorrow. Public Safety Minister Ralph Goodale says it is still not certain if the Canadian canola ban in China is connected to the Huawei business executive. China decided to block imports of the oilseed in apparent retaliation for the arrest of the executive in December at the request of the United States. Goodale says it is encouraging that China keeps insisting it is a technical problem. He says if China says it's a scientific issue, Canada can prove emphatically that it is not. Their parent company for agribusiness, Richardson International, has donated $1 million to Stars Air Ambulance. The company says it wants to support the service that helps people in rural areas throughout Western Canada. Stars says the money will help it fulfill its mandate. As a recognition of the large donation, Stars says the logos of some of the Richardson-affiliated companies will be put on the Society's helicopters. Boeing shareholders meeting in Chicago held a moment of silence for the 346 people killed in 2 deadly crashes of its 737 MAX jetliners. The meeting comes amid new questions about the company's handling of the crisis. Southwest Airlines now says it was not told that a safety feature on the MAX was turned off until after the crash. Boeing CEO says the company is completing an upgrade to flight software on the jet that will ensure accidents like the ones in Indonesia and Ethiopia will never happen again.
We do regret the impact that this has had to passengers. We know we do have work to do to earn and re-earn that trust, and we will. We've been very diligent about respecting the integrity of the investigation process throughout and providing technical support. We know that in both accidents there was a chain of events that occurred. One of the links in that chain was the activation of the MCAS system because of erroneous angle of attack data. That was a common link in both accidents.
The parent company of Tim Hortons says its first quarter profit was down nearly 9% over a year ago. Restaurant Brands International says its profit was $135 million US, which is down from $148 million in the same quarter last year. RBI missed expectations for adjusted earnings at 55 cents per diluted share. Revenue edged up to nearly $1.27 billion as comparable sales at Burger King were up 2.2% and sales at Popeyes increased 0.6%. Sales at Timmy's, however, fell 0.6%. Ireland's central bank has hit the Bank of Montreal's Irish subsidiary with a €1.25 million fine. It says the Bank of Montreal Ireland breached a condition of its banking license. BMO has admitted the breaches in full. This is the second time Ireland's central bank has issued BMO a reprimand and fine for deficiencies in regulatory reporting. Now, here's a look at today's markets. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, Lethbridge police have charged a 57-year-old man in connection with multiple break-and-enters, including the Lethbridge courthouse. The investigation revealed that various establishments were broken into, including the Cooperators, Varsteel, Synergy Digital Dental Arts, and the Catholic Central High School. Most of the goods stolen were cash, credit, and debit cards. Rodney Bruce Prince, of no fixed address, is charged with 4 counts of shop breaking and various counts of theft. Can incoming Alberta Premier Jason Kenney legally turn off the taps to BC if BC doesn't want to play ball to help get the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion built? We spoke with a lawyer in Toronto who's studying the issue and will give us his thoughts next. But first, here's a look what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. The Watch is looking for volunteers to act as additional eyes and ears for the Lethbridge Police Service. Volunteers will provide an extra layer of safety, promote the city of Lethbridge, build relationships with businesses, and some administrative duties. Training for the Watch program will be ongoing, and volunteers will be on foot patrol working in groups. For more information and to sign up, call Sergeant Mike Williamson at 403-330-5204. Come for a theatrical experience to Jake's Gift, a moving story of a World War II veteran's reluctant return to Juno Beach on Saturday, May 4th at the Lethbridge Legion. This multi-award-winning play features the performance by its playwright, Julia Mackey. Tickets are $20 per person and are available at the Lethbridge Legion office. Doors open at 2 p.m. with the show beginning at 3. To learn more about this play, visit jakesgift.com. Empty Arms is a self-help group for families who've experienced miscarriage, ectopic pregnancy, stillbirth, or neonatal death. Come and find support from those who understand what you're going through. This group meets the first Wednesday of every month from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. at the Family Center in the Lethbridge Center Mall. For more information, call the Family Center downtown at 403-320-4232. And that's your Bridge City News Community Calendar.
There have been a number of interesting court cases that have captured the imaginations of many Canadians. We want to try and sort through some of them today with media commentator and Toronto lawyer Ari Goldkind. Welcome back to BCN, Ari.
Great to be back on with you.
Now let's begin with one of the biggest election promises in Alberta, that is to scrap the carbon tax and to challenge it in court. A number of other provinces, including where you are in Ontario, are doing this right now. What are the chances of success?
I don't think there's a great chance of success on a legal basis here. And people should remember, this wasn't done for legal reasons. This is very much politicizing an issue for votes to get people riled up. Once it enters into the courtroom, it's a different fray. And you got a sneak preview of that when cameras were allowed in the Ontario Court of Appeal courtroom, where Ford lawyers faced a very hostile panel, essentially raising what I've just said, that there's a lot of politics involved here, but legally it seems well within the Trudeau government's rights to do what they're doing. And you have out west, you have the same argument sort of being floated, but at the end of the day, this gets into simple constitutional issues about who can regulate commerce, who can regulate trade. And I think the provinces who want to walk into courtrooms and say what Trudeau is doing is illegal, I think they have a very uphill battle in front of them.
That's what I was going to ask you. I mean, aren't the provinces saying that this is unconstitutional? The feds don't have the right to do this, especially if we have our own maybe carbon tax plan?
Well, that's one of the problems, is that they say they have a plan. Ford doesn't have a plan in my province, and Jason Kenney has been very tight-lipped about his plan there, other than railing against the carbon tax. The argument that they're saying in a nutshell is they can regulate their own reserves of oil, of gas, etc. But when you look at it really from an overall constitutional point, depoliticized, provinces cannot discriminate against other provinces. And Mr. Kenney has been very brazen about his enmity against BC. He's gone even further than the NDP. That will raise issues with judges. And when it comes to trade and commerce, that really is federal domain or dominion. So while the promise is very attractive, the turning off the taps thing, the killing the carbon tax, it is really done to get his base riled up. And look, he won. This was a very clever promise. But as we know from politicians who overpromise and underdeliver, courts might say, that's great in the arena that you work in, but in the arena we work in, the law is pretty clear that you can't thumb your nose at BC any more than BC can thumb their nose at you.
Well, let me ask you something, because the NDP in Alberta came up with that Bill 12 with the potential to turn off the taps to British Columbia. And like you said, Jason Kenney's threatening to do such. So how does this work? Does he actually have the legal right and ability to do this to another province?
So the short answer of the how is no, but here's how he says he could do it. In Bill 12, there's abilities to regulate the licenses of the energy exports or exporters, where they export, how they do it, how much they do it on a daily basis. But Kenney, because he's been so open about what he's doing, is clearly sending a flag to a court that this is really a discriminatory use of the reserves that he has in Alberta, and a court might say you can't do that. But the how is really interesting by him sort of monkeying with these licenses, and if the exporters and energy producers don't comply, he then can take away their licenses. I think even for energy providers who are looking to make a buck here, being told they can't export their goods to where it's gone for decades and years, that will even cause a problem with people who you would think are loyal to Mr. Kenney.
You know, it's interesting, too, a lot of friends and family that I have in the Okanagan in British Columbia, they're very much in favor of the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion. It seems like a select few, more so on the coast and maybe on the island, that have more of an issue with it. But people I spoke to in the interior, they're very much in favor of this pipeline. Now, still with politics, let's talk a bit about Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and threatening a libel suit against Andrew Scheer, saying the guy's a liar. You know what? I'm going to stick my lawyers on you. Scheer says to Trudeau, come on, bring it on. I want to see you testify under oath about the SNC-Lavalin scandal.
So here's why I like the fact that Justin Trudeau did it. And it won't affect most people, but there's a bigger message here. Trudeau is the prime minister. He gets trolled all day on anti-social media. Everybody calls him every name in the book. That is a very different thing than the leader of the opposition, a future potential prime minister, calling Justin Trudeau a criminal. And to me, Words matter. This is a government from Trudeau to Scheer to Jagmeet Singh that say words matter. Mr. Singh just wrote a book full of words that are very important for people to process. The reason I say that is it becomes a bit of a stretch to say it's fair comment to say Trudeau broke laws when Jody Wilson-Raybould, literally the horse's mouth, as much as she doesn't like being bugged or pressured about SNC-Lavalin, when she was under oath and she was asked, did Trudeau do anything illegal? Her answer was no. So for Andrew Scheer to come out and call him corrupt and he essentially belongs behind bars, if I was Trudeau, I like the principle. That being said, as a political move, I think it's kind of weak. I always think it looks weak when you run to the lawyers rather than running to the electorate.
Yeah, I mean, political posturing going on right now, and won't Andrew Scheer and the Tories use this to their advantage as we lead up to the October 21st federal election?
I think they could, and Andrew Scheer may have some wind in his sails, but there's two big questions I would ask if I was Justin Trudeau. Forget this virtue signaling, forget this everybody is racist, all-right, white nationalist nonsense that Trudeau puts out. Point out two simple facts. What does Andrew Scheer actually stand for? Nobody seems to know what he stands for, but for this wind in his sails about SNC-Lavalin. And number two, some good enterprising journalist really needs to get the notes of Andrew Scheer's private, closed-door meetings last year with SNC-Lavalin. What was Andrew Scheer talking about? The hockey playoffs? I'd like to know why Andrew Scheer has gotten a pass, but do I think Trudeau has sort of manned up in a way and say, you can call me a bunch of names, but I'm not going to be called a criminal by you? I think there are lessons there for all of us who are keyboard warriors when fair criticism becomes improper slander and libel.
I think you hit the nail on the head earlier when you said Justin Trudeau, because he's the Prime Minister, that's why he's under the microscope that much more. If Scheer was Prime Minister, I think you can be sure that he'd be blasted that much more as well, as opposed to opposition leader. Now, what about the Admiral Mark Norman case? His legal team is up against the federal government and is trying to gain access to secret government documents. It seems the government has been very reluctant to hand the documents over to the defense, which maybe doesn't seem fair. What's going on here, Ari?
And again, full disclosure, I am a criminal defense lawyer, so I'll put my bias on the table here. I don't love the word secret. We're not talking trade secrets here. We're not talking gunships into Afghanistan. We're not talking WikiLeaks. We're not talking about the safety of undercover people, CIA, FBI, Tom Clancy stuff. If you're going to charge Mark Norman with something that is very defensible and something that was on the edge of ever even being charged, how do you then run to a court and say, convict this man, ruin his reputation, take away his freedom, make him have to pay his lawyer hundreds of thousands of dollars? But if there's documents that show we've been talking about this prosecution, we've been sending emails about, should we charge him? Did he do something wrong? Are we covering? How do you have a fair trial system in Canada when that can't be turned over to the defense? And remember, for people to understand, let's say I'm wrong and these are really secretive documents. There's a procedure in our courts where this can be turned over to the trial judge. And the trial judge in his or her office can look at these materials and say, you know what? This was a fishing expedition. The defense team doesn't need these, shouldn't have them. But my view is to not even allow a judge to see them to determine relevance. That goes to the heart of fair answer in defense, which most people listening to us chat about this won't care until they're charged with something and they need to defend themselves with something the government is hiding.
Now, I believe this trial starts in August. Do you think maybe this will hurt Justin Trudeau and the Liberals heading up to the fall election?
I actually don't think the Mark Norman story, as much as it's covered on a big Canadian network funded by taxpayers, I don't think it has any wind in the sails of the electorate. I don't think most people could tell you who Mark Norman is. I don't think most people can tell you what Mark Norman is charged with doing. I think SNC-Lavalin seemed to be a bit juicier of a story to a lot of people, but come late summer, early August, late August, I'm not so sure that the Mark Norman story will be what we're talking about, or more importantly, the reason people are going to the polls to vote for or against somebody.
National Post reporter Christy Blatchford wrote a story regarding the trial of former Afghan hostage Joshua Boyle and his estranged wife, Caitlin Coleman. Now, there's been some changes in sexual assault law that could profoundly affect many sexual assault cases. Can you explain this for our viewers?
Yes, and anybody who hasn't seen the Christy Blatchford article in the National Post a couple days ago really should understand it and read it. It's great to go Google and read it. It's a very important article by a very talented writer. And here's what it is in a nutshell. As much as I think Boyle and Coleman are like crazy and who knows what they were doing in Afghanistan, and I don't buy and drink their Kool-Aid for 1 second. I wouldn't have been upset if both of them remained where they went to. Mr. Boyle is charged with very serious sexual assaults, particularly anal intercourse, on his wife. Now, why do I say that? Because the question that Mr. Boyle's lawyer wanted to ask Miss Coleman, his wife, was, isn't this something you guys did as part of your normal bedroom repertoire? You've done it in the past. It's part of your lovemaking, according to the defense. To then stop Mr. Boyle's lawyer from being able to ask that question when it really goes to the heart of the defense. We've been doing it for years. Now you're upset at me because we have a fight. Now it's sex assault. The reason we don't allow certain sexual assault questions to be asked in Canada is to suggest that women who dress a certain way are less worthy of belief, or women who have slept with a number of people in their lives means that they're going to choose to sleep with the next guy. I'm putting it in a simple way. But when it goes to the heart of defending yourself as part of the pattern with your own wife, Mr. Boyle's lawyer was stopped by Miss Coleman's lawyer that says, you can't ask me that question, and I'm going to bring an application to a higher court to say that is not fair game. And for anybody charged with sex assault, particularly in the Me Too era, the government has bent over backwards, pun sort of intended, to make it harder for accused people charged with sex assault to defend themselves. And even though Twitter and Facebook like the idea that everybody accused gets convicted, I don't like the idea that people who are accused can't defend themselves properly. We'll see what a higher court says, but that's where the saga lies, and Christy Blatchford really wrote a very important article about this.
So let me ask you something. What options is the Boyle defense team left with then?
So where it is right now is that they're making an application to a superior court in what's called a certiorari motion. It means getting a writ that this can or can't be asked. But what's interesting today, literally a few hours before you and I talked, is the lawyer for Miss Coleman originally said, if I don't like the decision I'm going to get at the higher court, I might appeal this to an even higher court and then the Supreme Court. The lawyer today says, I'll accept what the higher court says. The problem on a bigger scale here is our federal government has made it harder based on changes to the law that nobody has really paid attention to, hasn't gotten enough media play. Harvey Weinstein gets play, Kevin Spacey gets play, Jian Ghomeshi gets play, but if you're an average Joe across Canada and somebody falsely accuses you of rape or sexual assault, your federal government has made it harder for you to defend yourself, and no matter what side of the fence you're on politically, that should concern you, and that's really the heart of what's going on in Boyle and Coleman, because remember, he's not suggesting she's promiscuous, he's not suggesting she has slept around, he is simply wanting to suggest this is our repertoire, and she has said that should be off limits.
Ari, there's been a lot of talk about actor Jussie Smollett allegedly staging the story of the racist hate crime attack on him. And now, an incident in Winnipeg. The three owners of the Burmax Cafe reported a hate crime, robbery, and vandalism, but police have since charged the owners with public mischief. Now, tell us exactly what happened here and why is this bad for everyone?
So let's go back to Smollett, because I'll make a link between Smollett, as your question did, with what happened in Winnipeg. First of all, what Smollett did is ridiculous. He should be behind bars. He should never have had his charges dropped. The idea that he's a victim or a martyr is sickening. We live in a politically correct culture where he did 15 stupid fake community service hours for Jesse Jackson's coalition, forfeited some of his bond, and when he was guilty, and the evidence shows he's guilty for a series of political reasons, his charges were dropped. Let's now move to Winnipeg, where so many thousands of police hours, hundreds of them, so many people got their backs in a way bent out of shape about this, suggesting a virulent anti-Semitic crime perpetrated against them. Now, full disclosure, my name is Ari Goldkind, I'm Jewish. I hate the idea that 3 Jewish people would have come up with such a hoax to make all of us look back. It nauseates me. I think these people should be punished. But as I joked the other day on what I call anti-social media, are these people going to be able to do 15 stupid community service hours and pay $1,000 and get their charges dropped? No. I think the Winnipeg Police Service and the Crown Attorneys in Winnipeg will prosecute this in a way that Smollett should have been prosecuted. I don't think these 3 deserve a free pass. We don't yet know the reason fully why they did it, and as a defense lawyer, I want to know that. But these kinds of hoaxes are critically important to the descent, in my view, of identity politics and who's hated more, and this Islamophobia word that I have concerns with. I just think when people do this sort of thing, no different, Hal, than calling 911 when 911 shouldn't be called. It is public mischief. It affects communities, and it wastes so much police man and woman time that could be used for so many other things. There should be a punishment for these 3, no different than Smollett should have been punished.
Ari Goldkind, a criminal defense lawyer and media commentator, and always a pleasure having you on the show. Thanks again for joining me from Toronto.
Thank you so much.
Lethbridge and southern Alberta have been struggling with a crisis of opioid addiction, which is destroying so many lives. Various levels of government are doing their part to try and find solutions. But what role should the church be playing in all of this? Our guest today may have some solutions for us. Bill Zwartbull is the Executive Director of Love Lethbridge and pastor of Free Grace Fellowship, and he joins me in studio. Bill, welcome to BCN.
Thank you for inviting me. It's good to be here.
You bet. Now, first of all, what is Love Lethbridge all about?
Love Lethbridge consists of business leaders and pastors with the motivator for the church to serve the city in practical ways, specifically in the area of social needs or social injustices. So we seek to bring the government together, the business community together, and the church, and together to network to address these issues.
Okay, let's talk about, speaking of the issues, the opioid crisis in our city and across the province. Bill, some people say, leave it with the hands of the government. They know what they're doing. But you say, you know what, maybe the church should be involved as well. Tell me a bit about that.
Well, if we're going to stand on the Word of God, which is our foundation, we've got to consider who is responsible for these social issues. The government has no mandate from God to address them initially or primarily. It's the role of the church.
Now, you also have a prayer group in Lethbridge that's specifically praying for those who are addicted in our city with the opioid crisis. How does that look?
Well, it flows out of Lethbridge House of Prayer, which actually prays for a lot of things in the community and churches. So one of the focuses they have is they give a prayer covering for any developments or things we're involved in. So if something is being established or done out of Love Lethbridge, we let its leader know. If there is things regarding the opioid issues, we let them know, and we have their covering along the way.
What kind of an impact can prayer really have, practically speaking, in the lives of those who were addicted?
Well, from a distance perspective, the leader of Lethbridge House of Prayer is Jennifer. So she, for instance, every Monday morning, they and some of her team goes to Streets Alive. They've been doing this for a couple of years. They can now statistically show you the differences made before they've come in and what they're doing now. On a one-on-one, there's always an impact, more of the personal effects of people, and sometimes you see the change happen in front of you.
Now, you've been involved with the Fort Macleod Detox Center. Share a bit with our viewers how that's been looking.
Okay, so we had a story that was shared at a Lima Executive, so the ministerial, about an individual looking for help, calling the Alberta Helpline, and the final response was anything but doable or reasonable. So I felt a nudge in my spirit of, does the church want to know? And I raised a question around the table, which ended up in a roundtable discussion at a ministerial meeting, from which formed a committee of interested parties, leaders, to consider what possibly we can do. In the process, one of our members of the committee went to see the detox center and said, what are you all about? What do you do? Etc., which opened up an opportunity for us to go in there now and minister to the people firsthand and to seek to see their lives changed.
That's wonderful. Now, how about getting involved with some of the other churches in town? What kind of support have they shown you as well in regards to the opioid crisis? How they can help?
Right. So they see me as the representative of the faith, at least the evangelical faith community, regarding this issue in the city. And in turn, the city, for at City Hall, they see me again as the face of the faith community. And so they give verbal support. I give them updates, and they're very much on board. Yet not many of them have come on board or jumped on board and said, how can we get involved? There's been more individuals, whether it's just people in the churches and some leaders.
Why do you think that is? There's not that level of commitment maybe you're hoping for.
So we have a buy-in. So and it's more than lip service, but because of the leaders' mandate they have, there's pastors whose mandate does not go beyond the church walls. There's others who have a God-given mantle to go beyond into the community, and I do believe God has given me that. So for some, it's not something they feel they should take on, and for others, they probably have enough time commitments where they can't give it time even if they wanted to.
Are you involved with Teen Challenge as well, who also help people that struggle with addictions in our city?
I am. I've been involved with Teen Challenge for probably 10 years, at least 10 years. And one of the reasons is we have a few men in our church who've gone through the program and who are very much involved in Teen Challenge. So by default, I'm connected. They've been in our church and done their fundraisers and awareness, participate in their golf tournament every year. But also I stay connected and ask them the questions, what is the need in addition to rehab like Teen Challenge? And so we've had conversations around that, and which has helped to bring some clarity in my mind. What is the current need? What are the needs that maybe are not being addressed very well? And that came out of a conversation with Teen Challenge.
Now, Lethbridge has a safe consumption and injection site in Arches.
Yes.
Have you ever had an opportunity to reach out to maybe some of the organizers of Arches, talk about some of the programs and how maybe you can help, even from a spiritual side?
Yes, so when the city became aware we were meeting around this topic, they invited us to one of their meetings in the Culver Room at City Hall. And they wanted to know what we were doing, and they shared what they were doing. And they encouraged us to stay connected, not become too isolated. And in turn, they invited us for a tour through the supervised consumption site. And so some months later, when things were more settled down and organized there, we took a tour and we saw firsthand what goes on there. And since then, I've seen statistics, and so I have a level of awareness of the need and what's going on.
So explain to our viewers what you really share with recovering addicts to help steer them down the right path, Bill.
Well, for instance, when we go to the Detox Center, we are now participating in their programming. We are one of the groups that come in there on a regular basis, and we have like 1 hour to meet with them. So you're not going to get into the deep issues. You're not going to open up the can of worms because you can't put the lid back on in an hour. But what almost all of them have in common is a low self-esteem, huge issues, hurt issues that have probably not been resolved, broken relationships, and a lot of shame and guilt.
Is it a lot of escapism for them then at the same time? That's why they're using drugs to escape from a lot of the issues, the hurt, and a lot of the problems?
Absolutely.
So do you have a chance to maybe sit down with them and pray with them one-on-one?
What we offer is, so we go in for an hour. We give on a Tuesday morning from 10 to 11. And then we have up to an hour till lunchtime to do one-on-one ministry if they so desire. So they are required to be there for the hour. And beyond that, it's voluntary. So for instance, I was there last week, and there was 11 in the room. The hour was up, and 3 left, and 8 stayed behind. And I had opportunity to minister to a number of them one-on-one. But even the one-on-one, the others wanted to see what was going on. And so we have this little opportunity to minister to them in ways that goes beyond the physical and even the emotional.
So what do you see are some of the major underlying roots of the addictions from those you've talked to and prayed with?
Almost consistently, abuse.
Right.
And broken relationships.
Like marriages, maybe with their mothers and fathers, they had a terrible relationship?
Yes, or lack of them. In the foster care system, some of them they've lost a spouse in a fire or something like that, and it has devastated them. There was one case, he had cancer, got treated, got addicted to the prescribed drug, and that was his journey into into drugs.
You know, I've talked to seniors as well who suffer from chronic pain, fibromyalgia, and they get addicted as well to opioids because the doctors only give them so much, but the pain continues. So then they reach out and they need more of the opioids to help them, and they get addicted to the drugs as well. So it's not just young people, but seniors are also addicted.
Absolutely. We see all, you know, for instance, again, the detox or arches, we see all ages. Although the average, for instance, for arches or the supervised consumption site, the highest percentage is somewhere between 20 and 35. That would be the highest numbers for the age group.
So Bill, in your thoughts, what seems to enable people to help break that addiction, that nasty, vicious cycle of being addicted to opioids?
Well, like in all things in life, one that typically helps people to look for help is when they hit rock bottom. That's when you see that, they're in a good place because now they're ready for help. Another big one is trust. For instance, one of the topics I bring is honesty, getting honest with yourself, and I go into the area of trust. Who do you trust? And trust is a very big issue, and so how do you build trust? It takes time. So if they can actually trust somebody, now they're willing to open up and share a little bit, and some of the pains come out, the hurts come out, and you can begin to walk with them. But most of them, though they lean on each other, being in that world, yet they trust nobody but themselves.
Do you ever run into an issue where people who are addicted to drugs push you away and say, you know what, you're a Christian, you're going to judge me, get lost. I don't want any part of this. You and your God are going to judge me.
There are some of those. There was an individual recently who was, he had just come in, it was his first day into detox. He was very angry, angry at God, and it's typically around, God could have prevented this. You know, he's unfair. And so they're looking for somebody to blame for their problem, and sometimes it comes through other Christians, what other Christians have said, whether they are well-meaning or whether they are actually have stated in a way that is hurtful, no matter who they faced. So yes, Christians have hurt them, but sometimes it has nothing to do with Christians, but they know God exists, and this is my lot in life, so God is a vicious God.
So how can you really help people on the road to recovery after they've gone through the program, successfully beat their addiction? What's next for them? It's really a new life, it's a new beginning, isn't it?
It is a new beginning. So our long-term vision or focus for, you know, we have the opportunity at the detox is transition. So even after they come out of rehab, how do they transition back into society? Some of them have become institutionalized, even in rehab. Some have no way, they have never lived in what we would call a normal lifestyle. They don't know what it means to have wholesome relationships. They don't know what it means to hold down a job. They don't know what it means to balance a budget. They don't know what it means to put limitations on their lives. And so without those kind of safeguards, it's humanly impossible for them to really make it. So the God factor and God's people is huge.
So what models are used in other cities successfully that we can maybe implement here in Lethbridge? Or Fort Macleod, for that matter?
Well, I do believe that's a rehabilitation center like Teen Challenge is a great start because it's the Jesus factor. The Spirit of God makes the difference in your and my life and can make the difference in their lives. However, it doesn't mean they won't stumble and fall. And so, like the body of Christ, we need one another. So what are some helps? Maybe I'm not the right person to speak into it. I haven't traveled to the cities, but I am still looking for where is a model that's working that we can duplicate or copy or take some principles from. I don't know that anyone does it well in the province in which we live. And I've talked to people in BC, I've talked to people in some of the states, and I look at the web and I'm continuing to search for, Lord, what is the blueprint? What is your solution for our problem here in Southern Alberta?
What approach would you take to somebody, Bill, who may be of the Muslim faith, Sikh, a Buddhist, who may be struggling? You know, as opposed to somebody who may be, used to be Catholic, not a practicing Catholic, or maybe Christian, who's backslid. So how would you approach them? How would you approach them? Any differently?
I would approach them probably the same way, but maybe not the offensive language to them, but to love your neighbor as yourself, works everywhere. And so display the love of God, and if given an opportunity, to pray for them in the name of Jesus and have them experience the power and presence of God that their own God has never been able to do for them.
Now, programs like this, you need help, you need volunteers, financial help. Is there any way our viewers can help?
Well, we have a support network already in place for people who leave detox who want help, but we're currently having a difficult time because, for instance, an individual told me last week, it's like picking up a 1,000-pound phone to make that call. Because I know that's a good thing for me to do, but I don't dare. So prayer, yes. Prayer covering is huge. It's not just a cliche, it is huge. For us to break through, we have to first break through in the Spirit. Other ways, we will need a volunteer base when we begin to establish our transition network. We actually want to see a location established where we can catch people that are ready to go to detox, but they can't get in. When they want to go to rehab, and that there's a waiting list.
So where should people go for more information if they want to help out?
So currently we have an email address. It's Hope Initiative, so HOAP, Holistic Opioid Abstinence Program, so hopeinitiative@gmail.com.
Bill Zwartbol, who's Executive Director of Love Lethbridge and Pastor of Free Grace Fellowship, thanks so much for joining me in studio today.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and have a great night.